Egypt to Rome, we have to actually understand something very important. We have to put that in the context that this happened. The trip of Cleopatra to Rome and everything that involved was more or less about 30 years BC, right? So we are on that very important part when the old world was going to what we call the new world. And Egypt was very, very much the old world, right? By the time that these things happened, Egypt, the pyramids were 3,000 years old, right? Well, Rome was completely young, was the parvenu, the new rich kid on the block, which of course was going to become terribly important, but it didn't have the culture and the history that it had Egypt. When Egypt was coming, it was really in its decline. Rome was just starting its journey in the history of the West. So Rome was very new. When Egypt, for thousands of years, have been the place where everybody went to for knowledge, just call it philosophical knowledge, esoteric knowledge, mathematical knowledge, medical knowledge. Egypt was the place to go to. It was, if you were in any way interested and if you were a scholar, that's where you went to Egypt. So as we can see there, I will try to move this because it's not really where I wanted. Yeah, so to get it out of the way. Right. As I say, people were coming everywhere to get the knowledge in Egypt. But we need to look that within the context of what happening at the times. As you see there on the bottom, there is a small map. That is a map of the Mediterranean, because these days we talk about Europe, Africa, Asia. But it was not like that at the time. At the time, it was the Mediterranean, which was supposed to be the middle of the earth. And the countries around the Mediterranean were in itself a context. They were all related to each other culturally. They were doing business with each other. They were being conquered by each other. So it wasn't so much thinking North Africa and South Europe. It was the countries that were around the Mediterranean. Where you see the bottom star, that is Egypt. We're talking about Alexandria, and the top star is Rome, on opposite sides of the Mediterranean, right? Now let's look in the context of what was happening. We are going to talk about Egypt of the present, of Egypt of that present, 2,000 years ago. The pharaohs were gone. The priests were all in the south, and what we know of Luxor, Thebes, the Valley of the Kings. I know that many of you have traveled there, so you know what I'm talking about. But in Greece and Macedonia, there was a very important happening. It's been predicted by the Siva oracle that a great general was going to be born. And that general was Alexander, that as we know was very much known as Alexander the Great. Alexander, from a very, very young age, he became a general. He started conquering the lands around there. I'm talking when he was a teenager, right? And of course, the greatest enemy, the great empire, powerful empire at the time was Persia, what we call Iran today. And that is what he wanted to do. He wanted to conquer Persia. And so in his travels, he wanted to go to Egypt to see the oracle of Siva, to see the oracle will confirm that he was supposed the chosen one. He did go, and at the same time he liberated the Egyptians who were at the time under the yoke of the Persians. And the same 332, Alexander moved south to Egypt, and the Egyptian people welcomed the conquering general as a hero. They declare Alexander a pharaoh and a god. Well, of course they did. I mean, he liberated them, right? And Alexander, therefore, proceeded in his campaigns. But something that he did everywhere he went was to create cities. And modest that he was, he always called them Alexanders. In fact, there were many Alexandrias. The only one who survived, which survived of all those, was the Alexandria that was found in Egypt and the border. I got the dogs here on the border and the Mediterranean and the port. So when Alexander the Great conquered Egypt, the ancient Egyptian priests proclaimed him pharaoh after the oracle of Sheba declared Alexander to be a descendant of Amun, which was the chief deity of ancient Egypt. He freed them from Persian rule. But as we say, Alexander had things to do, places to go. So he just carried on, and as we know, he went into Asia. He went as far as India. Therefore, he put one of his generals in charge of the city he was creating, and that was Ptolemy I. So Ptolemy was as Greek as Alexander. He was one of his generals, and he succeeded Alexander as pharaoh and established the Ptolemaic dynasty. So that was how the Ptolemies from Greece ended up being the pharaohs of Egypt. Cleopatra VII, the one that we're going to talk today, which was the last Cleopatra and the last queen of Egypt, was a direct descendant of Ptolemy. And again, when we talk about direct descendant, there is something very important. Ptolemy Soter, which means Ptolemy the beginner, the first one, was the father of the dynasty. But of the 15 Ptolemaic marriages, the dynasty ruled for 300 years. 10 were between brother and sister, while 2 were with a niece or a cousin. They were marrying between each other to keep their blood pure. This meant that even Cleopatra VII, the last Ptolemy to rule Egypt, was not Egyptian but Macedonian. Of course, this inbreeding was less than ideal. Jealousy was rampant and conspiracies were common. Ptolemy VI supposedly murdered his uncle, brother, and mother, while Ptolemy VIII killed his 14-year-old and chopped him into pieces. The problem was, of course, if there was any other one who could have any kind of claim to the throne, the only way was to kill them. Otherwise, if you also had a claim to the throne, you could be the next victim. So whoever got in power, the first thing they do was to kill all the other ones who could have a claim to the throne. It's not very nice, of course, but it's something that it happened right through, especially in the kingdoms of the East. Anyway, the final pharaoh of Egypt was Cleopatra VII, who ruled Egypt for 22 years. We must understand that she became a queen when she was about 17. She died at 39. She controlled much of the Eastern Mediterranean Sea. Like many of the women of the era, she was highly educated. She was being groomed for the throne by her father, Ptolemy XII, in the traditional Greek Hellenistic manner. She endeared herself to the Egyptian people, participating in many Egyptian festivals and ceremonies, as well as being the only one who learned Egyptian, the Egyptian language, besides speaking Hebrew, Ethiopian, and other dialects. We're talking about a very, very intelligent woman who lived in a very, very difficult context and a very bloodthirsty family in a country which was in its decline. Now, Alexandria, who was the city where she was born and where was the seat of the power in Egypt at the time. I mean, I know that all of you must have been to Karnak, to Thebes, to Memphis, to those beautiful places. But by that time, the power was not there any longer. Of course, the priests were there, and still the priests had a tremendous importance in the life of Egypt, and they are the one who took the measures of the Nile, and they will be able to say if there was going to be a good crop or a good harvest of Noah and all that. But the seat of power had moved to the north, to Alexandria. And Alexandria was very, very famous for 2 things. The lighthouse of Alexandria, like I said, nearly all the Greeks agreed that the lighthouse should be included as one of the wonders of the world. It was actually one of the wonders of the world. And it was built around 300 on the Islas of Pharos and the harbor of Alexandria. 300 was when Alexander was there, when he actually founded Alexandria. The Islands of Faroes, it was a small inlet, which was across and the port, and it became so important that actually in the Latin language, the word Faros, it means lighthouse. It was built, the fires were burning all day and all night, and with incredible systems of mirrors, they make sure that actually it was a beacon of light to all the traffic in the Mediterranean crossing between what we call today Africa and Europe. And the city also was planned in the Greek manner, and it was really an amazing, sophisticated, beautiful place. But part of that sophistication, of course, was the famous Library of Alexandria. That was really famous around the ancient world. The Library of Alexandria had equivalent of 400 scrolls, which is about 100,000 books. We're talking in the past. Remember those who saw when I did the other talk and we'll start discussing the printing press and all that. This is long before. So all the scrolls were handwritten. So when we're talking about 400,000 scrolls at the time, there was the wealth of the knowledge of the known world that they have. And there were at every moment, at least 100 scholars working in the library. Was a real wonder. Now, things happened to that library. Later on, in one of the wars of Julius Caesar with Ptolemy, some boats were burned, and because the library was very close, it did get burned. But here is the story about it. The ancient library of Alexandria was destroyed on 2 different occasions. The originally library branch was located at the Royal Palace of Alexandria, near the harbor. When Julius Caesar intervened in the civil war between Cleopatra and Ptolemy XIII, which was her brother and co-ruler, Caesar set fire to the ships in the harbor. It's unclear how much was destroyed, but it was rebuilt shortly after. And there was another very good library in Ephesus in the coast of what is Turkey today, and a lot of books brought over to the library. But that was repaired, and the library was going strong. But then much later, the Library of Alexandria was finally destroyed by the Arabs on direct instruction by the second Muslim Caliph, Umar bin Khattab, in the year 634 to 644, we don't know exactly. When the Arabs conquered North Africa and they conquered it to stay, the library was burned by the order of the Caliph, who considered that knowledge and the representations of images and all that unholy. That was really, the destruction of the Library of Alexandria were one of the great, great losses of the knowledge of the world. We know that some of those books have been copied by scholars who have traveled from Greece, from Rome, from whatever, to pick up the knowledge and bring it back to the respective countries. But that repository and all that was really lost for humanity. Anyway, let's go back to the library. This is what the library looks today, a normal building being created, and copies of most of the books of the world have been brought to the Library of Alexandria. It was inaugurated just a few years ago in Egypt with major intervention and financial support by UNESCO. But of course, a lot of things, I mean, we're talking about works of Heraclitus, Sappho, Lesbos, and so many, Herodotus, all that disappear. Right. We say that the palace of Cleopatra was obviously in Alexandria and very close to the harbor. Climate change and a lot of different, a few earthquakes and things contributed to the fact that Cleopatra's Palace has been mostly covered by the Mediterranean. It's underwater. And archaeological discoveries made about 20, 30 years ago were brought incredible photos and how can I say, brought the whole palace and all this into light that before nobody knew about it, nobody have seen it. Only when divers by chance started going there, they found all this. Because to move it would have probably been very, very dangerous for what they found, they had decided to leave it there. And there is an underground museum for those who want to see it, and it's extremely, extremely beautiful. And I'll recommend it because there is a magic about it, about lost ships and all that. And I just put some photographs for you. And if anybody goes to Egypt, I recommend it beside the regular pyramids and etc. etc. Right now, we talk about Egypt, Alexandria. We put it in the context of what we're going to talk about. Now let's talk about Rome. As you can see in that map there, as mentioned earlier on, that was the known world and the people who were doing business with each other. Rome grew from a little, very, very poor town in 509 BC to eventually take over most of the peninsula and later the European and Mediterranean world. Rome expanded its territory in part because they extended many of the rights of citizenship to the people they conquered. They made them part of it, allowing other religions and building incredible roads that benefit conquerors and conqueror. One of the things that the Romans did, most of the time they will conquer, and they will leave even the rulers as governors. And because they felt that the people who've been ruling the country knew better how to rule the country than they themselves. So what they do is, of course, they were taking tributes, they were bringing food, they were bringing all the things that those countries were producing, but they led most of the time to preserve the religion, who was very, very intelligent, and then also to keep the rulers as governors. So that way, they had an incredible power over huge amount of land without having to put a lot of civil servants, shall we call it. And as you can see, what Rome ended up having it, the even part of England, which they didn't like it very much because there was nothing that they could bring from a big bag except a bit of wool. But that was the Roman world at the time we are talking about. So here I put some sketches of what Rome was supposed to look at the time, and one or two photographs of that is the old forum as it is, as we see it today, and the sketch on top was of the forum as it was in Roman times. And as you can see, they were borrowing a lot from the Greek style, and what it was very important is, in the early days, Rome had been a kingdom, but the fathers, or the Roman fathers, had converted it into a republic. They were terribly, terribly proud that they were not a kingdom, that it was a republic, that nobody could dictate to them, that they were the owners of their destiny. And of course, they had a Senate. The Senate, it was not very democratic, really. Only the senators, to be a senator, you had to be part of what is called the aristocracy of the times. You had to own land and to have quite a bank account. But of course, the Roman senators like to believe that they were, they were holding the morals of the country. They were supposed to be very, very modest. So there they went, they just grabbed the wife's sheet, wrapped themselves in a sheet and went to the Senate, right? Just to show, we all dress the same. Nobody is going to be here showing off. And when it came to governing, the governing was done by what they call a consul. Will be a kind of a prime minister, and the word consul didn't have the connotation that it has today. But the story is the consuls were only there for an hour, for a year or two, which means that very little was achieved. And there were continuous conspiracies and changes and political drama happening there, which made governing Rome very, very difficult. Well, it still is today. I know Max is listening to me. He's from Rome, and he will definitely agree with what I'm saying. Anyway, that was the Rome that was happening at that time. And very important is that while Rome had a government that was probably changing continuously, what they did have was a very, very strong army. That army had very well organized, it was very well supplied, they were very good tacticians, that's why they were conquering everywhere they were going. They had great architects and engineers, they could throw bridges around big rivers, they could build whatever was necessary. Of course, they built all those roads. Rome's strength was its army. And talking about army, probably one of the greatest generals of the Roman army was Gaius Julius. Caesar in itself was a title. His name was Gaius Julius. He was from the Julian family. He was actually an aristocrat himself. They were supposed to be descendant of Venus, but he was a poor aristocrat. His father died when he was young, and the rebellion of Spartacus. He had a very strong mother who really made him who he was, and he was actually raised by his uncle, who was a great, great general, Marius. So Julius Caesar, he had a short political career when he was younger, but he found that the best for him and what he wanted to do, it was to go into the army, which he did. He was the greatest strategist at the time. He was beloved general of his troops. They will go anywhere for Julius. And he also was incredibly intelligent and charismatic. When we come charismatic, let's say we're going to come into it just now. The people of Rome, the plebeians, loved him tremendously. And also he was a total ladies' man, and he had tremendous amount of lovers. He was married 3 times, but of course marriages at that time, they were nothing to do with love. They were political alliances, but he was very much the kind of Don Juan of the time, which didn't endear him very much to some of the people of his class. Right. But we have a very strong man who've been fighting all around Europe, bringing conquest after conquest by the Roman Empire. It got a time that Julius then wanted to come back, wanted to stop his campaign, stop war, and get into the political life. Well, of course, the Senate was not terribly happy with that. As I say, they were worried about him because they know that he was terribly popular. And if he was coming back from Rome, they were going to be out of a job. Anyway, so Julius Caesar came down with his army and back to the Roman peninsula, to the Italian peninsula. And there was an old Roman law that forbade any general from crossing the Rubicon River and entering Italy properly with a standing army. And that was considered treason. This tiny stream will mark the point of no return. The story was, of course, the generals and the army couldn't come to Rome because they were afraid that obviously they could have a coup d'etat, or that the army's power, it will influence the political activities of the state. Well, for a long time, Julius Caesar kept on asking for permission to give up his control of the army, and they wouldn't give it to him. No, sorry, you cannot resign. You have to be in charge of the army. Therefore, you have to stay on the other side of the Rubicon. That went on for quite a while. Of course, Caesar did have people on his side too in Rome, but there was a strong fraction who was against it, and they were using that law. Eventually, Caesar had enough of it, and on January the 10th, of the year 49, he does cross the Rubicon. And I'm sure that a lot of you have heard the expression of crossing the Rubicon, and that's where it comes. It was kind of, all right, there is a point, once I cross the Rubicon, there is a point of no return. I'm putting my mouth where my money is. But of course, that precipitated the first civil war of Rome and the rise of the imperial era in Rome. So Caesar crossed the Rubicon. Let me just get rid of this. Doesn't seem like I can. Yeah. Oh no, I just no. Okay, I can't move it up. Caesar, as I say, goes into Rome, and he's very well received by everyone else, by the populace, and immediately. I'm sorry, I can't get that right. He's very well received by the people of Rome. He was sworn, of course, as a citizen and no longer as a military place. But of course, the glory of what he had done and the wars followed him everywhere. And that was when Gaius Julius became Julius Caesar. And Julius Caesar he had two very good friends in Rome, and they created a triumvirate. I mean, three people are going to be governing Rome. And the triumvirate were Caesar, of course, Pompey Magnus, who had been a great general before, and who was married to Julius Caesar's daughter. Julius Caesar only had one child, which was Julia, his daughter, and was married to Pompey. Pompey was actually the same age than Julius, but as I say, the marriages were actually political alliances. And the other one was Crassus. I'm sure many times you have heard the expression, oh, he was richer than Crassus. Well, that was the Crassus. He was very, very rich, and he actually helped to fund the political campaign of Caesar, which was won without a problem. And the triumvirate did quite well, not for a very long time, because unfortunately Crassus died. So the people in power there were Pompey and Caesar. At the same time, Pompey's wife, which was Caesar's daughter, died in childbirth, so there were no more obligations between Caesar and Pompey. They start fighting, disagreeing about how to rule Rome, and there we have civil war. Right. Pompeo the Great, as I say, he had actually been a very good general. He had retired. He was already living in Rome, but he had a good political backing. All those who've been against Julius Caesar moved their power behind Pompey. And there were different battles. We must understand that the battles were never fought in Rome. The battles were fought outside the Italian peninsula, right? Remember, the armies were not allowed to come inside. So there were different battles. And unfortunately, well, as the things were at the time, and the last battle was the Battle of Pharsalus, which was fought in what we call more or less the coast of Greece today. It was a huge battle, probably the last battle of the Civil War. And Julius is victorious. The rebels scatter, and Pompey flees to Egypt. You know, he crosses the Mediterranean and trying to find refuge in Egypt. He makes it to Egypt with a few people, but the rulers of Egypt, that were Ptolemy and with Cleopatra, they also have their own problems. So Ptolemy, trying to ingratiate himself with Julius Caesar, the Victorian, the moment that Pompey arrives to the coast of Egypt, he has it decapitated. He makes his people kill Pompey. Well, that was not quite what Julio wanted. Julio had been a friend of Pompey, and he respected as the great general he had been. The idea is Julius wanted Pompey to say, all right, abdicate, there it is. And he wanted to send it into exile. By all means, respect his life. So Julius was not happy at all with what the Egyptian monarch had done. And as we say, Caesar arrives to Egypt with his army, and I think that painting actually caught very much the mood and what Julius was. He had won, but it was a civil war. And when seeing his writing, he was so upset about having a civil war in Rome, so much so that he actually forgave all the other ones, who some of them were sent for 2 to 5 years in Egypt, some of them were forgiven to come to Rome immediately. So there is Julius Caesar in Egypt. The first time he came to this place, remember, he was a military man. He didn't understand, or he never seen the kind of amazing places that he's going to see in Egypt. But there is another surprise for him. As I say, Egypt had 2 rulers, 2 co-rulers. One of them, Ptolemy, that was not happy with. And the second one, and that's when Julius Caesar has surprise, he receives a gift, a most beautiful carpet. And that carpet, when that carpet is open, comes Cleopatra, the other ruler of Egypt. Now, there is the legend, of course, that she didn't want Ptolemy to know that she was going to contact the Roman general, and that was the way she managed to present it to him without anyone there. Okay, we must remember she was 17, 18 years old. Julius was in his 50s probably. And they say that she was very captivating. She obviously knew how to play her cards. And didn't take long for him to succumb to her charms. And she, poor Cleopatra, explained how terrible her life was with that horrible brother of her, that she had to share power, that this couldn't go anymore. She definitely needed to get rid of Ptolemy, but of course, poor little her, she didn't have an army. Maybe somebody could help her, somebody with a strong army. And well, right. I don't have to say anymore. There comes her knight to save her. And there was a small civil war. Julius Caesar troop fought on the side of Cleopatra. And the fight was, the war was fought actually on the Nile, on water. Looks like Ptolemy was drowned on it. And Cleopatra became the sole Queen of Egypt. Must remember that she was still very, very young, and she, at that stage, there was one sister that was in Syria, which was far. She had most of the rivals eliminated. It was only a very little, very young brother she was very attached to, and but it was not a co-ruler. She was the ruler of Egypt. So of course, she takes Julius Caesar to see the kingdom. And one of the writers of the time, Appian, who was an Asian authority, speaks of the sojourn of Cleopatra, Caesar and Cleopatra. He said, he made a voyage on the Nile to look at the country with a flotilla of 400 ships in the company of Cleopatra. And the lap of luxury, of course, is completely, she showed her what the East could provide when it comes to the aspect of pleasure. And enjoy himself with her in other ways as well. Well, of course. And the news came to Rome, and that Julius Caesar was having this affair with the Queen of Egypt. Remember that Julius Caesar was married. And they wanted him to come back immediately. There were some problems in the north and North Africa with the king. Julius went quickly there, sorted out, and that was the famous Vini Vidi Vici, means I came, I saw, I won. And but he had to go back from this beauty, all this that he was flabbergasted, he goes back to Rome. So flabbergasted was that he decided, he started the building, to start a new buildings to be created in Rome and a new forum. The forum that we know today, the forum which rings we see today, is actually the one that Julius Caesar initiated. Anyway, so he has to go back to Rome, but he decides to invite Cleopatra to come to Rome, right? He says goodbye to the beauty of Egypt, to all the amazing things that he has learned, he has seen in this short time, and they present themselves as a couple in Egypt, and as he invites her to come to Rome, as I say. Well, she came to Rome with a bang. She knew how to put a show, and she really did it. Remember that she was a queen of Egypt. Egypt was the favored country of the Mediterranean, and where kings were not allowed. They were not supposed to be kings in Rome. Cleopatra traveled to Rome as a client queen. That is called client king or queens, and means ally kings of Rome. She was not part of the empire. She had not been subjugated or conquered. She was an ally, a friend of Rome, shall we call it. And she was there from 46 to 44. And because she was a queen, she was not allowed to stay in the center of Rome. That was also part of the old laws. King and queens have to be outside the perimeter of Rome. So she was staying in the most beautiful villa that Julius Caesar owned. And it was a bit of a scandal because he was obviously spending all the time in the villa, and everybody knew. But she came with a normal flotilla, with a normal treasure, and all that was shown in Rome. It was the show that everybody was talking about for a long time. She definitely made an impression. And she, as I say, she spent 2 years there. And those 2 years, she was the talk of Rome. The scandal from many points, but many people wanted to make alliances with her. First, because obviously she had the ear of Julius Caesar, but second, because Egypt was still very, very rich. And remember that Rome was very much into commerce. So it was skins, it was ivory, it was gold that was coming from the south, from Nubia. So it was a lot of people who wanted to deal. And of course, the food. Egypt was the granary of the Mediterranean. So a lot of people wanted to be there, to deal with Cleopatra. She became a terrible, important personality of the times in Rome. And what happened is that obviously in those years that she was lived there, she bore Julius Caesar a child. The child was called Caesarion, and while of course he was not legitimately the son of Julius Caesar, he was definitely legitimately the son of Cleopatra, and therefore he was on the line to be the next pharaoh. Right. So in the meantime, the politics were going on, and it was a lot of drama and subterfuge happening in Rome. And there were many who were very, very upset with Julius Caesar because obviously when he won the war, he had become an emperor. And there were those who say, no, there should be no emperor. Rome never should be exposed to that. We need to go back to a republic. But remember, as a republic never had really worked. But nevertheless, there were those who were very much against it. And so we come to what happened to be the killing of Caesar. A group of them plot together to kill him, and as you know, they did it. Julius was arriving to the Senate, and there were quite a few senators and other who were supposed to be his friends who killed him on the steps of the Senate. The conspirators were a political faction led by Junius Brutus and Cassius Longinus. Remember, for those who have read your Shakespeare and two Brutus, they wished to restore the Republic. They represented the state argument was that Caesar's power was a tyranny, and they wanted to free Rome from the rule as a tyrant. And the conspiracy in reality was because they wanted to gain control of the government, and a powerful group of senators supported the assassins. But they thought that all the people of Rome were going to be so happy because they had got rid of this tyrant, and that the people was going to be thankful for that. Well, they were completely wrong. The people of Rome rioted when he was killed, and the Senate, everybody started running home very scared because they know that the people of Rome was after them. So Caesar is dead, and Cleopatra is alone. She got no supporter anymore. She doesn't have a protector, and the things changed completely. After the assassination of Caesar and the young Ptolemy of 14, you remember I told you that she had a little young brother that she loved very much. Obviously, he was with her in Rome. And looks like the people who killed Julius Caesar have organized for the assassins to go and kill Caesar's son, but they made a mistake. They didn't kill Caesarion, they killed little Ptolemaeus, Cleopatra's brother. So Cleopatra had no protector, and she must leave Rome immediately. And she named Caesario as her descendant and on the rule. So Cleopatra goes back to Alexandria. But now the story in Rome is, who will be the new Caesar? You know, Julius Caesar Octavian, who was the heir, and he was actually his nephew, or Caesar, former right man and friend Antony. They brought down the murderers. But now this is this is terribly important because Julius Caesar Octavian was young. It was very serious, very much a goody two-shoes, and very moral, or at least he pretended. And he was he was very, very much against what had happened with his uncle and Cleopatra. Well, on the other hand, Marco Antonio, who was older, closer on age to Caesar, was really a bit of a libertine. He was a ladies' man who drank, he partied. He was very much interested in theater. Sometimes he had a lot of actor friends, and he had also all kind of lovers. They were two complete different personalities. Now, they were very much, because they were the friends of Caesar, they were very much involved in bringing down the assassins of Caesar. But once that was achieved, the situation started deteriorated, and the alliance was very fragile, began to fracture, and the two became bitter enemies. And that is going to bring us to the second civil war of Rome. It was the second and the final war of the Roman Republic. Right. So we got two very different generals who wanted to be the new Caesar. That war was going to last quite a few years. In fact, it was going to last 13 years. Sometimes will be won by one, some won by the others. Remember that the wars were always fought outside of Italy, and it was tremendous chaos because the government was actually going yo-yo from one side for another in Rome itself, and the fractions were getting together, and that one won in Gallia, then they have more supporters, etc., etc. So we got Cleopatra. Now she needs to find a supporter. She needs to find an ally. And she needs to go again on the seduction trip. So, okay. Yes, I know what you're thinking, girls. I agree with you. Never mind. Okay. Well, she does it, of course, but she had to choose now. There were two powers. And the two powers, as I say, they were Octavio and Mark Antony. Well, Octavio was out of question. He was never be the guy that she could seduce. He was his morals and his whole idea were completely again, and he hated her from the time that she was involved with Julius Caesar. So in reality, she didn't have much of a choice. Mark Antony was the one she had to go to find an ally to. Of course, it worked without a problem. Mark Antony was puppet in her hands. Very true that happened. In fact, they eventually marry, but quite illegally, of course, because Mark Antony was married. And to make it even worse, Mark Antony was married to Octavian's sister. So, one of the things. Wonderful stories, when we don't need to watch TV. This is actually much more interesting. So anyway, Cleopatra, at that time, Mark Antony was in Greece. She arrived there with his boat with purple sails, say the chronicles, and etc., etc. And they become allies. She's supporting with her ships. She had a lot of ships, and the Egyptian ships were much superior than what the Romans had at the time. And so they established this in Egypt. She has him as his co-ruler. You can see even coins were printed with their names. Those are paints at the time. And they had quite a few children. And remember that she had a lot of power in the East. So she could bring a lot of allies to Mark Antony from there, and a lot of wealth to fight those wars. So they were winning and losing for quite a while, and eventually in Acton, in the year 31 BC, was the beginning of the end for Mark Antony and Cleopatra. Octavian's power base was in the western part of the Roman territories, while Mark Antony controlled the eastern part of it with the aid of his lover, Cleopatra, the Queen of Egypt. The relationship gave Mark Antony access to the riches of the East, but it also scandalized Rome, a situation exacerbated by the fact that Antony had abandoned his Roman wife, who was also Octavian's sister, what I told you, big scandal. And Octavian's propaganda machine was soon hard at work, portraying the struggle not as one between just him and Antony, but as a war between virtuous Rome and decadent Egypt. It was always very much that. Even later when we were talking, in the time of the Crusades, it was always the same. Rome was supposed to be very virtuous and straight, and the East was always to be completely decadent. Anyway, the Battle of Actium, which was fought on water, most of it, and the 31 BC was really Antony lost, a lot of the allies that were supposed to come and at his succor didn't do it, and that when he runs back to Egypt, knowing that was the last battle, and that they had lost. Therefore, knowing that there was he didn't expect any mercy from Octavio, Mark Antony commits suicide. What happened after the Actium? Well, there we have. When news of the battle reached Antony's eastern allies, most of them abandoned him. He retreated with some 60 ships to the fragile safety of Alexandria in Egypt. By the following summer, Octavian invaded, and deserted by his allies and his surviving troops, Anton committed suicide. And Egypt was swallowed by Octavian's empire. So that was the end for Egypt too. Octavio came into Egypt, conquered Egypt, and from then on, it was going to be what we will call a colony of Rome at the time. It was terribly important for Rome because it will give them a solid source of wheat. Remember that in those times, wheat was the armies were fed on bread. Bread was the staple of the time, was the staple of everything. One loaf of bread was a measure that the people of Rome will get. So depends how many were in your family. If you were 5, you got 5 rounds of wheat, and it was supposed to be free by the government. That's why when there were problems with harvest or whatever, you had riots, because every person, and I don't say every city, but every person who lived in Rome had the right to have the one loaf of bread. So it was tremendously important for the political and the social stability of the country to have enough support of wheat. And so having Egypt was securing, besides the wealth that they managed to steal, to take back to Rome, it was insurance for the future. Right. So Octavian, yes, becomes really the winner of that, and is going to become the new Caesar. In fact, he changed his name, and you probably have heard it a lot, Augustus, the famous Augustus Caesar, and he's going to be an emperor for a very, very long time, one of the longest emperors. And I must say, he was actually a very good emperor. He got a lot of stuff done in Rome. He had a lot of buildings built, and he brought a lot of stability to the country. And after that, we all know about the whole stories of Tiberio and Caligula and Nero and all that. So probably, sorry, I'm repeating myself. He was not a very popular, not a very friendly, not a very charismatic person. He was probably one of the best emperors that Rome had. But anyway, Julius was dead, and Mark Antony was dead. For Cleopatra, obviously, that was the beginning of the end. Did she love Mark Antony? I don't know, but it was her partner. It was her support. It was the father of most of his children, and she knew that with the end of Mark Antony, that was also the end of herself and of her kingdom. The reason that she will have to die was because, as we say earlier on, the Rome was very, very proud of being a republic, and no king could be there. And as I say, Octavian, later Augustus, relied on the bad judgment of Mark Antony, and Antony did not disappoint. In an Egyptian ceremony, Antony married Cleopatra, and even worse, in a later ceremony, he and Cleopatra were crowned king and queen of Egypt. Worst of all, they crowned their 3 children, monarchs of other Roman Middle East provinces. There was not another word for what they'd done but treason. Okay, as we say, Mark Antony killed himself, but Cleopatra was still alive, but she was part of treason. And the penalty for treason, from the point of view, from the Roman law, it was death. So the Roman law dictated that Cleopatra should be treated as an enemy of the state. Enemy of the state because she had married Mark Antony, who was married, and because they had declared themselves kings. She should be taken back to Rome in shackles and paraded before the mob. That's what always was done. Octavian was relieved then when Cleopatra took the courageous decision to end her own life. He knew anyway that despite whatever, that there was the law and whatever, she was a woman. And the populace have been terribly impressed with Cleopatra. So the fact that she took the decision in her hands was probably better for everyone concerned. In Rome, the son of the orator Cicero, who was one of the great enemies of Julius Caesar, announced the death of Antony and Cleopatra with relish. Mark Antony was stripped of his accolade, his image was erased from coinage, and his statues removed. In fact, you probably see that when I was organizing this PowerPoint, I have very, very few images, real images of Mark Antony, because most of his statues were destroyed. On the street of Octavian, as you know, Mark Antony's eldest son also committed suicide. What is very much show that not only in the East these things happen, Mark Antony has Caesarion, the sole son of Julius Caesar, killed because too many Caesars was not possible for the Republic. So there was blood indeed all over. And Cleopatra herself, she decided that she was not going to allow anyone to kill her or to take a prisoner. So she went into her mausoleum. Remember, the Egyptians used to build their mausoleums quite early for the time of the dead. She locked herself in the mausoleum with two of her girls. And when the soldiers of Octavio came, and there is something also that was written in the past, it said the messengers of Octavio came, and on opening the door, they saw her stone dead, lying upon the bed of gold, set out in all her royal ornaments. And Iris, one of her women, lay down at her feet. And Charmian, who always been her companion and her nanny actually, just ready to fall, scarce, just able to hold up her head, was adjusting her mistress' diadem. When one of the soldiers came in and said, "Oh, Charmian, are you happy what has happened?" And she said, "Yes, I am." She died as it became a queen of Egypt. And the maid died herself too. The three of them committed suicide. And I must say, Cleopatra was very much loved by the people of Egypt, even though she was not Egyptian. She was the last queen of Egypt, and she was not Egyptian. She was the last of the Ptolemies, but she was the one who really had endeared herself to the people of Egypt. And while she obviously had an argument with the priests and thieves and all that, she was recognized as such after her death. So, with the death of Cleopatra, the sun had finally set on the Hellenistic dynasty, and indeed on 3,000 years rule of the Egyptian pharaoh. We must remember she was only 39 years old by the time she died. She lived in very tumultuous times. Yeah, she's always portrayed as a femme fatale. That was, of course, remember, the history is written by the winners, and the history was written by Octavio. And I think that she was exceptional for her times. Imagine at 17, 18, becoming a queen, and all the things that she did, and the alliance and all that with Julius Caesar. When she went to Rome, she was hardly 20 years old. And she was very well educated, and she was a great strategist, and she tried to do the best for her kingdom. And she did the alliance that she had to do to save her kingdom. Of course, herself, there was self-interest, everything of that. But was she a female fatale? Well, maybe she was. She knew she was in a time when the rule, it was male rule. And she had very few sources. She didn't have by any means a family to support her. The family were all gone. And I think that the history, sometimes I put Cleopatra just as a beautiful woman who used her charms for her own ends. I think more than that, she was a great strategist and a very intelligent woman who understood the politics of the time, and she managed them to try to keep her country and her people alive. And I thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy the talk.